When I think price check, I think Pearce Dietrich. So Pearce, we're going to start with you here. Dive into first look at salaries for the NFL Championship Series that is on the way, obviously, in just a few days. Patrick Mahomes, understandably, is the top-priced quarterback, top-priced guy in general at $7,400. You got Joe Burrow, you got Matt Stafford, you got Jimmy Garoppolo. I think it's pretty safe to say most of these are not like the rest. Mahomes really in a class of his own. Do you need to spend up, though? Do you need to spend that salary on Mahomes, or is it more enticing maybe to pay down and pay up elsewhere?
Where's the respect for Joe Burrow? I mean, Mahomes is good, but these other guys are pretty good too. They've gotten to the championship games, and if you want to win that $1 million pouch, you should probably play Joe Burrow in this game. He got sacked 9 times and still threw for 344 yards. The numbers against Las Vegas weren't great, 244, but that was a conservative approach. They had the lead for all of that game. They weren't really playing against a high-powered offense. Well, just look back to the last time they played a high-powered offense, which was Kansas City, and Burrow threw for 446 yards and 4 touchdowns. The week before that, 525 yards and 4 touchdowns. And the kicker is his receivers and his pass catchers are all really cheap. It's very easy to stack the Bengals. I don't see why you don't.
Matt, do you have a good reason why you don't?
Well, I think that a lot of people are going to do that. I think Mahomes will probably be the top-owned quarterback for GPPs, and I think Jamar Chase will probably be the top receiver. So this is not going to be a sneaky strategy. That's really the only reason, though. Like, Mahomes definitely deserves to be the highest-priced quarterback, and I think Burrow deserves to be the second most expensive quarterback. But I think going to the other game is reasonable because those guys are it's another tier to Stafford and Garoppolo, but I don't think the drop-off is very significant. I think it's a little bit of a drop-off. And I think we could have a game where Burrow does turn the ball over, the Chiefs get up big, and then the other game ends up being a shootout and Stafford and Garoppolo are better. So as like a tournament pivot, I think there's plenty of reason to not play Mahomes, even though he does deserve to be the top quarterback. And I think that game probably will have more points.
Well, Steve, it's easy to make the case if you're just focused on differentiation above all else. Sure, go to Jimmy G, go to Garoppolo, because obviously he's not going to be nearly as owned as all those other guys. It's just, I think it's also pretty easy to argue he doesn't have the ceiling that the others do, at least offensively. Statistically, he doesn't do it week in and week out. So where would you lean?
Would you build a lineup with Jimmy Garoppolo?
Well, I mean, if I want to be different from everybody else and chasing $1 million, I mean, how else are you going to beat tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people? Maybe you need to.
No, you don't.
I'll send Steve a screenshot of my Garoppolo lineup. Just
there
to be clear.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt, because I guarantee you there won't be a screenshot to send, okay? So you just calm down right now. Let me tell you, quiet, Matt. You've had your time. You don't talk about Jimmy Garoppolo in a positive manner on this show, okay? Not necessary. Joe Burrow, all right? Jimmy B, he's a hunk, all right? You know who's one of the best quarterbacks against man coverage this season? It was Joe Burrow. Guess who runs a lot of man coverage? The Chiefs. Why do you think he threw for almost 500 yards in that game? Because Joe Burrow absolutely slices and dices man coverage. On the season, he averaged 9.2 yards per pass attempt. That was the best in the league during the regular season. In zone coverage, 8.7 yards per attempt. One of the best in the league. Joe Burrow is going to be able to do what he did to the Chiefs before and absolutely slice them up and have one of those monster games that we've seen already this season. That offensive line's got to do something. I don't know if they don't like Joe Burrow or something. You got to do a better job at covering your quarterback. That is the guy. The only reason you are as far as you are is with Joe Burrow. So do a better job at covering him. But seriously, this is such a good matchup for Joe Burrow. Obviously, Mahomes is in a class of itself. What's Jimmy Garoppolo doing here? It's kind of funny. Why are you here? But Joe Burrow, that's the guy you want to be targeting this week.
All right, Bukes, let's stay with you since you love these Bengals as much as you do. Could you make just as good a case for a Joe Mixon and paying up for him as you could for Joe Burrow and obviously the matchup that he's got? Mixon's coming off of nearly 23 fantasy points. And of course, that divisional round sets up well. He was just as active in the passing game as he was out of the backfield. Is he going to deliver again here at $6,800?
Yeah, look, Mixon hasn't been overly effective, really in the second half of the season. Like you look at some of his games, like he's getting the carries for sure, but it's not like he's gaining a lot of yards on the ground when he's getting those carries. So I'm not exactly looking at Joe Mixon at 6,800. I feel like he's a little bit overpriced. Like there's not like a clear cut RB1 that you need to put into your lineups this week. A lot of the, star running backs are out. This is not exactly a team that have strong running backs. Like, I'd probably go with Mitchell, even though the game script is most likely not going to be in his favor, but they love going to him, man. And they're trying to mask Jimmy Garoppolo as much as possible because guess what? He stinks. Okay. So they want to run it with Mitchell. That's why even in a game, that was as close as it was, still had 17 carries, had a handful of targets. Jimmy really can't throw at this point. And when he is throwing, it's basically going to go for a pick six at this point. So they want to avoid the pick six as much as possible. So by doing that, you go with Eli Mitchell, 5,900. I think that's the guy you roll with this week.
All right. So, Matt, while you're obviously quarterbacking Jimmy Garoppolo, are you paying up for Joe Mixon then since you got all this extra salary to burn?
Well, to be clear, I do like Matt Stafford more than Jimmy Garoppolo. I just think that game is going to go overlooked. But if you're going that route, you do have extra money to spend. And the way I see the slate breaking down is that a lot of people are going to want to play Burrow, Mahomes, and the passing games there. And Joe Mixon, as the most expensive running back, I think could be only the fourth most popular running back because he is overpriced. Like, there's no question about that. So my answer is Joe Mixon worth paying up for? No, in the sense that he's too expensive, but yes, in the sense that I think a lot of people won't do it. And at least the one selling point that Mixon has going for him that's different than the rest of the season is over the last 4 games, he's averaging 6.5 targets. So they are using him in the passing game. And I actually do think it's perfectly viable to play a Bengals stack with Joe Burrow that also has Joe Mixon in it because Mixon has become more of an important piece of the passing game over recent games.
And what the heck? Maybe Jamar Chase. Load it up, Pearce. What do you think?
No, I'm not going to go with Mixon. I get the strategy point of it. If last week was a bad running back slate, then obviously this week's going to be worse with the same teams and fewer teams to pick from. So Jerick McKinnon is where I will go back. I know Edwards-Helaire came back last week, but Ad Levitan tweeted out a comparison between the two, and McKinnon out-snapped him 53-23, ran more routes 41-11, out-touched him. Even if Edwards-Helaire is a little bit more healthy this week and gets a bigger role, we could see McKinnon still easily reach value. I don't see why they would lower his role in this matchup. Maybe Reed does. But either way, even if he's simply just the pass-catching back, that's a good matchup against Cincinnati, who are 27th against receiving running backs, allowed the 5th most receptions to receiving running backs, 6th most in yards. The AFC game is just simply where you have to target, especially for the value.
Pearce, it's no surprise that Cooper Kupp obviously is as expensive as he is. It maybe was a surprise he was left as wide open as he was at the end of that game to set up the winner against Tampa to advance his team to the conference championship. Is there any universe in which you could fade Cooper Kupp coming off a game where he had damn near 200 yards?
Can you give some of these guys some respect? I mean, maybe he got open on his own. Maybe he earned those 200 yards, Kaufman. I don't know. It seems like he's been doing a lot on his own this season. Yeah, you roster Kupp if you can afford him, always. But the guy I'd take first is Jamar Chase. He is cheaper, and I don't know if he's just as good, but from the fantasy perspective, he's in a better fantasy environment. We just saw this game. There's mountains of evidence. You just trust your eyes. You play Jamar Chase. The burden of proof isn't defending this pick. It's defending why you don't pick him. And the only flimsy argument is going to be that he's going to be really heavily owned. And so, sure, fade the best player on the slate, and you can lose some money.
Ukes at $8,800. I mean, do you just have? Sometimes you got to eat the chalk. Is this one of those situations?
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, the only reason that you're going to fade Kupp is that you can tell that we're stretched for questions because it's a 2-game slate. We're talking about if we're going to fade Cooper Kupp or not. But the only reason that we're going to do this is that if you feel that one of these more expensive guys can outperform Cooper Kupp, and thus you're in a better position than everyone else. Is that guy Deebo Samuel? Is that guy Tyreek Hill? Is it Jamar Chase? It could be one of those guys. But you're talking about fading somebody who has at least 7 targets every game this season. Somebody that's gone over 100 receiving yards multiple times this season. Somebody that is damn near uncoverable at this point, and now going up against the San Francisco 49ers, who, to be fair, limited him to 7 catches and 118 yards and a touchdown the last time those teams played. Okay, this is the type of player we're talking about. So at this point, I'm just like, I don't care. I'll just eat the chalk here. Maybe I'll throw some dope in there that I have no reason to put in there, and that will be like my play to differentiate myself. But at this point, like, you're not fading Cooper Kupp unless you have some strong lean, and I'd love to hear what that lean is, that Cooper Kupp's not going to have a good game against the 49ers.
Matt, any way you can present us with that strong lean elsewhere?
Well, I do think Cooper Kupp deserves to be by far the most expensive receiver, but I don't think being contrarian is really the only reason to fade him. The other reason is just he is really expensive on a slate where we don't have value plays. And there's a scenario where Kupp scores 25 points and Debo scores 25 and Tyreek Hill scores 25 and Jamar Chase maybe even scores more than that. So if you love this Bengals and Chiefs game and that game's a shootout, you may not be able to fit Cooper Kupp in the lineup. Like the real reason that I'm getting to here is there are so many good wide receivers on this slate. And Cooper Kupp is the best one. Don't get me wrong. Like he's definitely the best one here, but between Samuel Hill, Chase, even T Higgins, like there are a lot of good choices. So I think ultimately you probably play Cooper Kupp, but I think there are at least reasons to consider other guys because this is just such a strong slate for wide receiver.
Tight end position's interesting, obviously. We've got a couple of the bigger names in the NFL that still remain. You've got, of course, Travis Kelce, George Kittle. They're the top two guys. Kelce's $1,500 more than Kittle, though, which is obviously something to consider here. And then you've got, potential salary savings, a Tyler Higbee. You've got CJ Uzomah. I mean, you were just saying here, Matt, that there's no real value on this slate. Maybe you mean at receiver. Maybe you mean in general. What do you think of these guys?
Yeah, my lean here is that Travis Kelce is only going to be the third most popular tight end. And for that reason, I think that he becomes easily my favorite. CJ Uzomah is 3,400 and he's the most underpriced guy for sure. Like he's a focal point in a good offense that's going to have to pass a lot. Most likely the Bengals are going to be throwing. And then George Kittle's only 5,000. And with Debo Samuel banged up, I think it's going to be a pretty common move for people to say Debo's a little bit hurt, Kittle will take over. So Kelce is priced up and it's just going to be hard to afford him. So I'll say Uzomah is the best value, but I think Kelce makes the most sense as a tournament play. And obviously Kelce's a great player who can score a ton of points in any week.
Pearce, are we, not giving Travis Kelce the proper respect here?
Yeah, you're giving Kelce enough respect, I suppose. He'll be fine if you can afford him. That's a way to get contrarian. But if you're going to pay up at receiver and quarterback, then you've got to cut somewhere, and it's going to be tight end. It's going to be Uzomah. It's going to be the popular play. I'd like the AFC game. We're going to see more scoring. We're going to see more passing. That's where the action is. San Francisco's not a good offense, and they're playing a good defense. I don't want to roster them. LA is inconsistent, and they're playing a good defense. I don't really want to go there. Uzomah, 6 catches, 64 yards 2 weeks ago. Last week, 7 catches for 71 yards, 6 or more targets in 6 of the last 8 games. You saw last week with that pass rush, getting sacked 9 times. Burrow was checking down a lot to Uzomah. He'll see plenty of action. I don't know if he'll explode, but he saves you some money.
What do you think, Bukes?
Yeah, one of the guys that hasn't even brought up is Tyler Higbee at 3,700. Like he's not getting into the end zone as of late, but since he's returned to the lineup in week 16, has at least 6 targets in 4 of those 5 games. Like Stafford is going to him. He's moving the ball around to all different receivers in this offense. I know it's a crowded offense, so there's a little bit of, worry there, but at least Higbee is getting the targets and he's getting the yards too as well. The DraftKings fantasy points aren't showing that, but because he has less than 10 points in 3 of those 5 games. But at the same time, if he's getting that type of volume and then he does get into the end zone, that's where you're really going to get the value here for somebody who's only 3,700, especially with Uzomah going to be the more popular play. Higbee's only $200 more. So if you want to differentiate yourself a little bit, Higbee might be the way to do that at tight end.
Bukes, we may be stretched for questions, but we do have one more we got to get in. We got to be fast with all of you for it. And that's the top value play here in the championship round. Of course, Gabe Davis last week, value play among value plays, $4,600. Guy went north of 50 points. Who's it going to be this week, Bukes?
Yeah, Cam Akers, 5,000, 41 carries in the 2 weeks he's been back. 5K, that's a joke. Give me Cam Akers.
Pearce?
Byron Pringle, 7 targets or more in 4 of the last 5 games. Cincinnati ranks 27th against wide receiver number 2.
Who you got, Matt?
Well, I don't know if anyone cheap is going over 50 fantasy points, but I do think Tyler Boyd is worth considering. I like Pringle, Pearce just said, so I'll pick a different guy. I think Boyd in that same game is cheap also and definitely on the field enough to have a big day.